being an educator, I find myself frequently depressed about what seems to me to be a change in education. When I went to college, I just went to see what college would have to offer. I would take my classes and get excited about things that I had never heard of before or thought of. And, I developed a love of literature, a love of philosophy. There was all this fascinating stuff out there, right? And it wasn't aimed at, how will this get me a job that will get me promoted, that will get me to, right? It closes off the possibility. It doesn't even suggest to people, well, find something you're passionate about and then develop that. Or it doesn't ask you to be kind of self-exploratory. You think you know what you want and you go for it, and then it's not what you want. And that, I think, can create a crisis of meaning. So what I would like is to be able to turn the public discourse around from that and, kind of encourage people to step back and ask questions about what would make my life worth living earlier in the day and approach their opportunities in that spirit.
We should say we're talking about two papers by Susan Wolf. There's the later paper, which was published in 2016, so actually pretty recently. It's called Two Concepts of Rule Utilitarianism. And then there's another paper called The Role of Rules. And that was published earlier, but I think in 2002 it was published originally. And I don't know, there's a sense, I don't know, this might there's kind of a sense in which the two papers have a little bit of conflict, right? In the sense that in the earlier paper, she did kind of explicitly not endorse a straightforward consequentialist or utilitarian approach to rules, but then defends rule utilitarianism in the later paper of a certain type, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I think that's going to be kind of interesting. Maybe I can say something real quick about the point of both of the papers. Do you remember when we read Asymmetrical Freedom? And I remember this distinctly because Adam, you and I both had the experience of reading the paper for the first time. And I remember both of us talking about the fact that we didn't really know almost what was going on or what the point of it was until the explosion 4/5 the way into the paper.
Yes.
That it wasn't as intense, obviously, because that was a volcano eruption. But didn't you kind of feel the same thing with the Role of Rules paper a little bit, where it was sort of I kind of, I got what she was saying. I didn't think anything was crazy. But then on one page towards the end, I have the entire page highlighted where she's just whoa, just reconception of even morality in general, not let alone the role of rules.
I didn't get that as much, but I'd be happy to get it on.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean? Nice. Yeah.
So, because it was actually the second one I read. So,
okay.
I guess I had read Two Concepts of Rule Utilitarianism first.
Same.
So I felt just I don't know, I guess reading that one first, I felt I was kind of in dialogue with the topic already. So I don't know. So maybe some of the things, some of the parts of the conclusion I either missed or felt kind of came more naturally.
Yeah.
Point. I don't know. So
okay, maybe I'll say my little blurbs about what each paper's aims are. So in Two Concepts of Rule Utilitarianism, Wolf's defending a type of rule utilitarianism conceived under the lens of providing rules of practice as opposed to rules of thumb. So she's largely responding to this one philosopher, J.J.C. Smart's criticism of rule utilitarianism. And his criticism is pretty simple, but it's pretty good, actually.
It is good. It's a very, very good criticism.
It's a really good, so basically his criticism is that if you think what justifies an act is the utility it produces, how is it ever more than rule worship to stick to a moral rule that does not maximize utility, even though we have that intuitive pull to do so? So Wolf thinks that conceiving of morality as a practice allows us 3 defenses of obeying rules that do not maximize utility. And basically, I mean, we can talk about those in a second, but yeah, morality as a practice allows for these sort of more personal ends to be incorporated. I mean, since we're already talking about that, like let's just continue talking about it. So I've actually I've always been drawn. I remember having conversations with you specifically, Adam, in college about rule utilitarianism, and I've always been drawn to it, but I've never been able to defend why it doesn't collapse into act utilitarianism, because I just didn't know. Like I don't know. I was drawn to it, but like you can't read everything, so.
Sure, of course.
But this is actually like very interesting in that sense. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, do we? So, you know what we should say just at the top for any of us to like as a reminder, but also for the listeners, a few basic definitions to get on the table. So, utilitarianism is the moral theory that basically just states that at sort of like the bottom, like the rock bottom of the moral theory is the idea that what is good to do is maximize pleasure and minimize pain in general, right? And there's always been 2 different ways of being a utilitarian. You can be a rule utilitarian or an act utilitarian, and basically those break down in the sense that you can take it on an act by act basis. So like whatever individual act would produce the most utility is the right thing to do. But then there's sort of a more abstracted version of it, which is rule utilitarianism, which states that you should follow whatever rule in general produces the most utility. And as you say, like Smart's criticism is that, okay, it's very underhanded in how good it is actually. It's like, okay, well, if you think that what justifies an act or a rule rather is its proclivity to produce good consequences, like produce utility, then on what basis could you resist violating a rule if violating the rule just produced more utility? Like you don't have, if you're going to say that one is right on that basis, you can't say that the other is right. But this sets us up with like really kind of we're very squeamish about like accepting a lot of the kind of reductios to that. Like there's the deathbed promise, there's the scapegoat, and there's the organ donation one. I mean, people have heard of like all of these, but
yeah,
I like the scapegoat one the best because it does like violate like there's some very strong intuitions there. Like if you could just prosecute someone you knew you were innocent to quell the mob, like would you do it? And like the intuition is that like you really don't want to do it, but like if you're a rule utilitarian, or if you're a utilitarian in general, like on what basis do you have to resist it? I don't know. Sorry, that I realize I've been rambling for a while, but like I don't know, Giffin, what did you think of this paper in general? Like both Smart's response and then how, I mean, we'll get into it, but like how satisfying did you find Wolf's reply?
I really liked Smart's response, and I kind of liked Wolf's response. I mean, it's clearly within a theme that I'm like kind of only lukewarm on. So like I thought it was like good, but it's into an overall kind of structure that I'm only warm on. So yeah, no, it was good though. I really enjoyed the paper.
I was gonna say that totally tracks like your niche for the series so far. I mean, not a bad way.
This like Wolf is all the way through like every single thing we read. Like there are some like strong trends. So
oh yeah, no, it's honestly
you
insane.
Can't like read this and think like it's anyone other than Wolf writing this.
No, there's no way.
It's pure Wolf.
She shows up so powerfully in every paper she writes. It's crazy. And I don't know about you guys, but like every single paper I've seen every other paper show up in, like every time so far.
Yeah,
it's like
100%. There's a super structure.
It's
like,
wild.
She could have just written like a 500-page like kind of super book, and it would be as coherent as like all these small papers are, just because there's so strong of through lines.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. What did you guys think about the 2 different concepts of rules? So there's like rules of thumb and then rules of practice or practice rules. So basically, like I'm trying to make sure I understood this correctly.
Here, let's go to the page on that.
Yeah, so
It never hurts to read it again.
of course. So it's page 128, but that's where it's like you see how there are pages on the side.
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So she's saying a few lines into that. She says, specifically, Rawls showed us that while many rules can be understood as rules of thumb, offering general advice about how to behave based on statistical prediction of what patterns of action are likely to be optimific, other rules have a different logical status. These other rules Rawls labels practice rules, because they are rules that partly constitute the practices they concern. So I loved the game analogy throughout this too, by the way. She says games offer good examples of practice rules, since games are typically defined by sets of rules that specify what moves can be made in what circumstances, what counts as winning and losing, in short, how to play. So, I mean, yeah, basically, I'm also understanding it like, okay, so there's kind of like two almost varieties of rules of thumb. Like I almost think she should say something different than rules of thumb in a way, because it's also like, if you're a strict utilitarian, it's not even like a rule of thumb. It's like the rule of the fist. Like whatever maximizes utility is the right thing to do. Right? Like, is that how you're reading it as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But she basically, so she uses that distinction to say that, okay, well, there's sort of two parallel conceptions of morality, right? There's morality as a point of view, which is congruent or analogous to the rules of thumb. So basically, right, morality as a point of view is the idea that, like, you've heard she uses it in the paper, but I feel like you've heard of it before. We say, like, from the point of view of morality, or like the moral point of view, you ought to do this, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, like, I take it that, like, morality as a point of view is basically just like this if-then chart for actions, right? So it's like an algorithm in the sense that you plug in the details of the situation. From the moral point of view, you get like a decision that maximizes utility, right? Like, it's just, it's pretty simple in that sense. Okay. And then she draws the analogy between rules of practice and morality as a practice. And okay, this is what I wanted to kind of get into. So this is under the section where she says morality as a practice. It's the second paragraph. She says, as an alternative, we may think of morality as a practice, that is, as a loose and informal institution, itself perhaps embracing some smaller sub-institutions, constituted by a set of rules that specify offices, roles, moves, penalties, defenses, and so on. So she kind of moves on to say, like, okay, but okay, what's the point of the practice? Like, what are the goals or the functions of this practice? And she says that an answer that readily comes to mind is to promote the common good, or more specifically, to bring about the greatest good for the greatest numbers. That has like a very utilitarian bend to it, right? Point of view of the universe, best rules in every case. Okay, so basically, so here's how I'm understanding this, and like, I want to hear if you guys agree. So she's basically saying, okay, in a very Wolf style, like, this fits with everything we've read, obviously, but like, morality as a practice is far more broad and far more messy than just like maximizing one value, right? And I think this shows up a lot in her, like, the earlier paper too, the role of rules. But she's basically saying that, like, if we identify morality as a practice, it's like I don't know. I think the analogy to the game is like important, actually. So when we're playing a game, I don't know. Okay, like, here's a question. Like, do you think the analogy to the game is a good one or not? Because like, I'm thinking like, Adam, I know you're like really into chess, right? And isn't it the case that like whenever you play chess, like I've seen you and Trey play it on the computer version,
Sure.
and it always shows you like what the optimific move would have been, right?
You could know that, yeah.
You could, okay.
Yeah. Well, in this scenario, let's just say you can know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, because I'm just thinking, so there's not like a plurality of ways to play the game, in the sense that like if you want to be like optimistically rational, you would always do like the best possible move, right? And that sort of looks utilitarian almost in nature, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that like there are only certain moves that are best. So
yeah, and it's precisely like even if there are more than one moves that are best, it's because they're both equally best. Like that's not a count, you know what I mean? Like that's not a counterexample. So like that way of playing the game that seems like it's actually a better analogy to the morality as a point of view. But then I'm also thinking about like something like Settlers of Catan, and maybe that's what she's thinking about. Not maybe that game, but like she uses bridge as an example, but actually I have no idea how that game works. So I just
not a clue.
I don't even know. Like I don't even know. Like
I was actually very upset that she chose bridge.
I know. So okay,
yeah.
What if we say it's Settlers of Catan, where it's like okay, so the goal is to win, right? And that's all of our goals. But within that, there's like many different ways you can win. And there's also sort of like, and I think she would also importantly say like, okay, there are, like she says this at one point, I don't remember where in the paper it was, but she was just like, it's also the case that the set of rules that define what to do are also the set of rules that constitute like the game you're playing, right? So it's sort of, I don't know, there's like this weird way in which like it's like I don't know, did you guys get this experience too? Like whenever you're learning a new game, it's actually like really demeaning if someone tells you what the point of the game is if they've explained the rules, right? So like, okay, so if they say like, okay, in order to win, like you need 10 points in Catan, and you can get those 10 points through like a variety of methods. And then like imagine they turn to you, be like, so you want to get 10 points? Like you'd be like, yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
So there's something in that analogy that's making me think like, okay, is Wolf pointing to the fact that like within moral life, like when you understand the set of rules that comprise moral life, like in understanding the rules, those constitute like the aim as well. Is that supposed to be the analogy that she's drawing?
I don't know. I'm going to be honest. It's a bit lost on me.
Yeah.
I feel like this distinction, like I feel like I understand it's outside of the game aspect.
Okay.
Like when she just straight up like defines like the rules and then brought them up later, the two different types.
Two different types of rules. Oh yeah.
Yeah, like rules of thumb.
Yeah.
Or in this case, like practice rules. Like I feel like I understand what she's saying, but I don't see the analogies much with the game. I think that's probably my fault, but I just like I don't know.
No, I mean I kind of felt the same way. I think the game analogy made it a little bit more confusing than just like defining the types of rules.
I am just trying to think about like, I don't know, because there was something that struck me as like, something struck me as right, but it was definitely more intuitive and less like explicitly cognitive.
Because like a practice rule, like in the game, it's like, okay, so let's draw the analogy. Help me out here. It's like a practice rule in the game.
Let's go with chess, not bridge.
No, stick with Catan. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so like in Catan, like, okay, a practice rule is you've got to roll 2 dice on your turn. Like you have to roll 2 dice. Like that's how the game's played.
Yeah.
But like a rule of thumb could be, it's good to try to get a port.
Yeah.
It's good to try to get a port. Or it's good to concentrate on these certain resources early in the game. Or like that,
if you have resources to build a road, then you should build a road.
or even
like
I feel like even like the more kind of like brute utilitarian would even say just like at the core it's like it's good to get more points. Like that's like the most basal you can get, right?
Yeah. A rule of thumb, it's good to get more points.
That which maximizes points is good. Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that construction.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are all kind
Is that a rule of thumb or is that more macro?
I was thinking about that until he rephrased it, which is more so like broadly of any of the rules of thumb, that which maximizes points is good.
Because rules of thumb are like heuristics, right? They're sort of just saying, okay, if something either tends to or does lead to more points, it's the thing you should do, in the sense of like,
I mean, a rule of thumb would be like an example of that, but you kind of stated like the broad idea of it, which seems to be more analogous to like a conception of morality rather than a conception of rules.
That's why I said she should have, like the rule of thumb is actually like linguistically misleading from what I think. Like that's why I was joking like it should be called like the rule of the fist, because it's like in like moral system, like if you're a utilitarian, it is just straight up like that which maximizes utility is the right thing to do. So the heuristic, if you're a rule utilitarian, it makes sense to have rules of thumb, rules that tend to maximize utility, right? But it's always the same aim, right? So in Settlers of Catan, then it would be, okay, like a rule of thumb would be like you ought to build roads, because roads, there's no way in which roads don't translate in general as a rule to like maximizing points, right? That is that the analogy?
It's like a good rule of thumb, yeah.
Okay. I actually think this has clicked for me. But but rules of practice aren't going to be like that. The rules of practice are going to be like what Adam said. Like, okay, every turn you start with, rolling two dice. So it's like, okay, rules of practice actually like define the practice of the game.
Exactly.
You roll a 7, then, a series of actions are consequent.
And the rules of thumb are more of, just
to achieve the aim.
How do you achieve the aim?
Yes. The game in that case.
Yes, or the moral system in the analogy. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
How to play the game versus how to win the game. Or
that's actually that's actually a really good way to put it. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So so I understand that like in the context of games.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's now draw the analogy that she's trying to draw. Okay.
Yes.
So I understand this.
Yes. Okay. So here's how I'm seeing this. Okay. If you view morality as a practice, that is viewing morality as a system of rules that defines like the practice of morality, for lack of a better term. So basically, as opposed to if you view morality as a point of view, that is all about like a rule informing you what you should do, as opposed to what rules do in morality as a practice, which is constitute like what moral life means, essentially, right? So let me see if I can find like a good quote from the, because I don't know,
because I want the direct analogy to be drawn.
Yes.
So like
yes,
in terms of morality, like what are my practice rules?
So okay, just to gauge your guys's perspective right now, I think I understand the analogy to morality as a point of view. I think I need to get more clear on morality as a practice, what that means.
Okay, that's exactly what I want to drill down.
Okay.
I read the paper, admittedly once through, but I wasn't exactly sure what morality as a practice meant. So.
Okay. Can I don't know what this quote is, but I have it highlighted. Maybe I'll just read it.
Page?
In the morality as a practice section, 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs down, 3 lines in. So she says, if one identifies the moral point of view with what Sidgwick called the point of view of the universe, or alternatively, one assumes that morality is a practice with the aim of fostering the common good, one will get the same answers about what the morally best rules are in every case. When we ask about the moral status of individual actions, however, our answers will sometimes diverge. Okay, let me read that again just to make sure I understand it. Okay. If one identifies the moral point of view with what Sijek called the point of view of the universe, okay, so like that kind of like impersonal morality, that algorithm is going to like spit out an answer at you, right? Or alternatively, one assumes that morality is a practice with the aim of fostering the common good, so that more pluralistic view, one will get the same answers about what the morally best rules are in every case. When we ask about the moral status of individual actions, however, our answers will sometimes diverge. As we have already seen, when we think about morality as a point of view, we must assess the moral rightness of individual actions by the same standards we apply to the assessment of rules. If we are, in addition, utilitarians, then the right action will be the action that maximizes utility, even if this involves knowingly violating the morally right rules. Okay, this seems important, but if we think of morality as a practice, then the question of what action is morally right is analogous to the question of what card to play in bridge or what verdict to deliver in court. It must refer to and abide by the rules that constitute the practice. Okay, so she's saying like, okay, when she uses the court analogy, okay, like a rule of court or like a rule that constitutes the practice of court in like the legal system is that if you believe the defendant is innocent, you must issue that verdict, right? Like that's a rule that like constitutes law as a practice. And then if you're looking at that from the utilitarian rule of thumb perspective, you should say the verdict that you deliver should be the one that maximizes good utility, right? Or good utility, just utility. And she's saying, okay, like I understand. I think I'm understanding the distinction there at least more, right? Like, and I think she wants to defend the idea that morality is a practice such that, oh shit, okay, is this her point? She's trying to say that morality is a practice that if you look at it through that like kind of singular valued way that act utilitarianism does, she's saying like you destroy the practice itself, because like what does it mean to have a legal system if the verdicts just maximize utility, if it's not about like who's guilty and who's innocent, but whether or not convicting an innocent person will satisfy the mob? Is she trying to make the point that like if you actually like subvert the legal system and ground it in like a utility maximization, you no longer have a legal system? Like when you do things that are practices and you evaluate the maneuvers within those practices according to one value, like one external value, then you destroy the practice itself.
Yeah, right? I mean, would the institution even survive? Like, is it utility maximizing to have a court system? Like,
no, because I think she's going to disagree with that way of looking at it, right? Because where is this? Is actually in the other paper. This is in the role of rules. She says there's a utilitarian response. I don't have this verbatim, but like, doesn't she say there's a way that utilitarians can respond to these concerns by saying like institutions are good insofar as they maximize utility, but that's not like that. That's a way of like reframing it, right? I think she's trying to make like a sharper divide there, right? Because like initially I had that thought too, Giffin, where it's like, okay, but can't a utilitarian just say like, well, we should follow, like you could imagine like we should follow the legal practices because they tend to produce good consequences, right? Okay, but then she's going to bring up Smart's objection and just say, okay, but if that's your basis, then why wouldn't you, like, if I tell you though that convicting the innocent will satisfy the mob, why, if your basis is maximizing utility and that's why the law is good in the first place, why don't you do it in this case, right?
I mean, this definitely has me kind of, I don't like which practices do we value? Like it's got to abide by, like it must refer to and abide by the rules that constitute the practice. I mean, what if you're someone that operates like in the financial system, and like, you know, you have like a duty to your shareholders, right? Like, is that not like the aim of the practice, is to like deliver a, you know, like, you know, a return on investment? Like, is that not like the whole game? Like, is, you know what I mean? So
yeah, and isn't like, that so isn't this exactly what Smart would reply to what I just said on Wolf? So it's the paragraph that I just read, it's the next one down. Yeah. Smart says, but why should you do what's morally right? If the stakes are high enough, it may be more rational and even more admirable to cheat at cards, or like Adam, in your example, to like violate your duty to the shareholders, right? Or like in the legal example, to prosecute the innocent person, right? Okay. She rephrases the question, I think, in the next paragraph. She says, how can it be rational at once to support the practice of morality, whose goal you recognize as promoting the common good, but not support an action that violates the practice if it is clear that this case will promote the common good by violating the practice? Okay, so Smart's like re-upping the critique there, right? Okay. Let's see what Wolf responds with. Okay. On the next page, the second paragraph, she responds, Smart's challenge applied to the practice of bridge, but let's just assume that it's like, you know, practice of law or whatever, amounts to something like the question, how can it be rational to support the game of bridge on the grounds that it is fun and intellectually challenging, and yet not support breaking the rules of bridge when doing so would be more fun and challenging? But this question has a number of possible and plausible answers. So what I just read was, okay, she's asking Smart's challenge phrased in the context of her analogy to a board game, right? And then she's responding to that by saying, there's many plausible answers. If I'm just trying to get peacefully through a weekend with my in-laws, for example, the safest bet would be to play the game straight, even if it does not maximize or even our aggregate fun and intellectual challenge. Okay, I wrote right under. In the next paragraph, I actually wrote, I expected more than this, to be honest, because she says this, I might mention, for example, that it would be an abuse of my authority, or that it would be a gross violation of the defendant's moral and legal rights. This is back to the law analogy. Or I might point out that if it should come to light that I knowingly convicted an innocent man, I would be disbarred and disgraced, and that is a chance I'm not willing to take. Like that, I don't even think she concludes on that, but like I thought that was such a weak reason to like.
I had the same thing.
Because like, me too, actually. I think we all kind of read that paragraph.
Yeah, because I read that and I was like, that is not going to convince a utilitarian at all. He's going to be like. I was talking. Yeah.
No. You were talking.
We have to revisit this paper because I referenced it several times already. But like, do you remember the Bernard Williams paper where he critiques utilitarianism, but like theories of morality in a larger way by saying like it violates the integrity of the individuals? I remember George the chemist and the other person who like it's. Did I not say this before? Like the guy who encounters the population of natives and has to like kill one of them. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I was just getting a blank look. I was talking about that with Luis, the normative epistemologist that I have a class for, and I was cracking up because he was like. He was like, he's like, I don't understand what like Williams is on about there. He's like, no, like you don't get to just say like, well, I'm going to refrain from doing the right thing just because like it would make me feel bad or like it would violate my integrity. It's like, no, like you have to do the right thing there. So I'm imagining that response like applied to this argument from Wolf. Like the utilitarian just gonna be like, what are you talking about? Like if it's the right thing to do, like the chance of you being disbarred and disgraced, like if that's factored into the utility calculus, like you don't get to say no to that.
Yeah, I mean that was like a more hyperbolic kind of example. of like how I kind of felt throughout like Wolf's papers. And I'll say like, so in the beginning of this section, morality.
I've never felt that until this particular exhibit.
I always feel like much more
I
softly.
Yeah, that's slanderous to say that.
I said it was a hyperbolic example.
You're telling me you felt that deflated feeling for every one of her counter examples? I certainly haven't.
No.
Just like this slight doubt you have in this paper, this is persistent through all of them.
Well, that
I'm just messing, Giffin.
No, I'm just messing around.
Yeah,
too,
no, I got it. So
it's
I don't
fun
know
to pretend you despise her work.
Just secretly seething moments before we start. Not another one.
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
So I went back to like the beginning of morality as a practice. This is how I read it. Is like I had to keep reading this section where it's like we might think of morality as a practice that is a loose and informal institution. And then like she gives like examples that into the game analogy.
Yeah, kind of like the institution of law, right? Like that's the analogy she's trying to draw.
So
okay.
So there's two kind of observations I had that I think tie into this. Is like I think this kind of take on morality seems to kind of like lower morality a bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's basically taking. I mean, from what I gather, it's taking the similar stance to like her previous papers, where it's kind of like it's not a superstructure, it's one of our structures.
It's metaphysically lowering it. Yeah.
Yes. So within that, I'm sorry. I just loved the example of where she's like, well, anyways, we talked about that. But so that was like one of the observations. But like, I don't know, did you guys like? I basically wrote down like, if you kind of view morality as like kind of a social institution that's kind of designed to address our reality where we don't have certainty. Is that kind of like what an argument she's making? Because that's like how I could conceive of it, but I just like it got lost in the game analogy a bit for me.
Giffin, I kind of had a similar viewpoint actually to you. I'm not sure this is what she was saying, but like whenever I read that section, I kind of read it very similar where I was like, okay, like if morality in this sense is like the game, like what is the aim of the game? Like a utilitarian, okay, to maximize pleasure, minimize pain. Okay, so that's like the overall aim of the game.
We don't have the algorithm that like the chess.
Exactly. We don't have perfect knowledge of specific things one can do. So it's more of like rules of thumb.
So I read it as differently than that because I think the problem Wolf would say with that defense is that okay, but then that doesn't address Smart's original like objection at all, right? Because if you granted that we did know, you would still be right. So I read it as slightly differently, where it's so I read it too as there's a social aspect going on, but I removed the uncertainty from it because I don't know. I always think like epistemic challenges are kind of bad to bring into these sorts of papers because you can always just flip it around and say, but if we did know that, like that, like,
and she does actually. Like I wrote down this is the third paragraph in on this page.
Yeah,
I like have super bold. It's like, given that you will do more good by convincing the man in like this given. So like once you're in that space, but I don't know the way she described it, like at the very beginning of this section, that's kind of what it felt like to me. Like it's a practical, I mean, as a practice almost implies like a kind of a practical purpose. Right. So,
okay, wait a minute. Okay. I'm maybe the structure of the paper actually is relevant to the content of her argument in the sense that, okay, I wonder if I've been reading this wrong in the sense of like, okay, maybe here's what she's doing in the paper, right? She's saying, okay, if you view morality as a practice instead of a morality as a point of view, just spot me that. And then if you do that, then all of these good things follow. And because those good things follow, so we haven't gotten to like those good things yet, but maybe the point of the paper is supposed to be, if you find that these conclusions of switching how you view morality are sound, like you buy them, then those give you reasons to switch your view of it. Maybe she's not making an argument that like it's more you could imagine like, well, it's more parsimonious to like flip your view from one way to another, or it's more like theoretically congruent with something else. Like this style of argument seems to be, here's two concepts. We have intuitions that match the point of view concept, but what if we viewed it this way? What would follow from that? And if those are good, then we should keep that point of view. And so then that means we should talk about the three things that she thinks would result from that. Right.
I'm so sorry. So let's go like a little more concrete here.
Okay.
So let's go with like the doctor example.
Okay.
Right? Where like
yes.
So what is her approach to that? How does she salvage kind of following just rules of the profession, rules of expectations that we have as a society,
yes,
instead of following a purely hardline utilitarian, perspective. Like, how does that?
Okay. So here's how I think she's doing that. She's saying, you're the doctor. There's two perspectives you can view this from, right? There's the point of view of morality, like the cold, calculating utilitarian approach of an act type, right? That says like, you basically just read Smart's argument and you go, yeah, he's right. And so you kill the one patient or whatever and do the others, right? Mm-hmm. She's going to say there's another point of view through which you can view this, right? There's the point of view of morality as a practice. And a subset of morality as a practice is how morality shows up in all of these different domains, right? So there's, can show up differently in like the legal system, can show up differently in the medical system, right? So part of how morality shows up in the medical system is that we have bought this set of rules that constitute the medical practice. Now, those rules include a lot of things, but in this scenario, a relevant rule is that you don't kill a patient that, has nothing wrong with them.
But like, what undergirds those rules?
Well, that's yeah, exactly. Yeah. So okay. Yeah. So she's saying so we need to talk about that, which we haven't yet, because I think that I read this initially like you guys did too, and it's starting to kind of click for me, maybe potentially, where she's not offering like a priori reasons to switch views. She's saying switch views and then see what follows. And so here's what follows. This is on the next section where it's called the practice conception of rule utilitarianism defended. Okay. The next the second paragraph or whatever, she says, here's how she's answering Smart's challenge to say, why not kill the one patient, right? She's saying, from the point of view of morality as a practice, here's a defense. One that strikes me as plausible and attractive involves the idea that to take it upon oneself to subvert the practice of morality by choosing that a certain person die for the sake of the greater good would be to set oneself up as special or better than others with respect to one's knowledge and authority. For what one is contemplating is the violation of a rule that, as a practitioner of morality, one would not allow others to violate. Okay, so that's the first one. Here's how I think we should talk about these three reasons. Let's talk about them on their own merits for a second, because I think we're all actually somewhat confused about the 2 points of view. Is that fair? Like, what do we think?
Yeah, yes. I don't love reason one. I don't know if you have similar issues with reason one, but
I think they're going to be the same as yours.
Doesn't she kind of backtrack a little bit with the kind of, you just kind of flapped me on a point which was a fair point on your part, but then she kind of actually does what I just accused her of doing, right? Because it's like,
remind me what that was.
Well, she says, okay, well, one way you could approach this is that, you kind of set yourself apart or above, others in a sense by making this decision without having perfect knowledge of the situation. And it's like, well, what I think the more interesting question is that we do have knowledge of the situation, right? Like we're not talking about a situation here in which there is ambiguity of whether one's action would lead to greater happiness or pleasure and with my suffering. Like,
oh, okay. So okay. If I'm understanding you correctly,
do you understand that point?
You're saying, okay, wait, so pretend like Wolf never said the thing about being found out as like as like a violator of the because that's just bad. Like let's pretend she never said that, right? Because that's just a bad reason. If I understand your response then to her first point, you're saying no, I actually would be okay with someone doing that if it was in fact the thing that maximized utility.
Yeah, I'm certainly starting to think that way a little more.
Okay.
I'm not wedded to that position, but I certainly think that that's an irrelevant statement on her part to say that there's like some ambiguity to like.
Well, so there was no. I think there's
where
no.
Exactly were you reading again there? Because it said.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. So this is. I don't know if it's a different paragraph or the continuation of the first, but I don't think that this reason had anything to do with ambiguity. I think this reason had to do with.
We have to reach. Yeah.
Page right before 137. Right before 137. She says, okay, I'll just read it again. Okay, here's a reason. So to take it upon oneself to subvert the practice of morality by choosing that a certain person die for the sake of greater good would be to set oneself up as special or better than others with respect to one's knowledge and authority. For what one is contemplating is the violation of a rule that, as a practitioner of morality, one would not allow others to violate. I think the thing that she's pointing there to is the fact that you wouldn't allow, if you're drawn to this yourself, it's like, okay, but you're not thinking about the fact that you would not allow other people to violate this rule. And Adam, I took you to be saying, no, I would if it was the right thing to do. I think the ambiguity, I don't think that this point had much to do with ambiguity.
It did a little bit, because it's saying, you could be accused of thinking oneself better than others with respect to one's knowledge and authority. But it's like, in the situation we're describing, like for the knowledge aspect, we're saying like in this scenario, you do know that it would maximize utility. Where it's
others.
Yeah, it's not some false sense. It's not as though you could be wrong or that you have perfect knowledge. Like in this situation, like we're assuming like
So she's saying, okay, you know that this would be the right thing to do, and someone else also, like, someone else is in the position to be the doctor. They also know it's the right thing to do. She seems to think that just people in general are okay with them violating the rules, but not others. And that doesn't really make any sense, because from the moral perspective, we should all be equal.
I think, though, if I knew...
Yeah. This seems to only make sense if like the actor is the one with perfect knowledge and the others in the social situation don't, which is just kind of strange.
No, I think it's different than that. I think her point is like, remove knowledge from it. Both people know. And actually, I'm also agreeing with you guys in that I think it's not a great reason, but I just think that we're like, I think the way to do it is don't hinge it on like knowledge of what's right or wrong. Grant that both people equally know.
That's why it shouldn't have knowledge. It should just have authority.
Yes, I agree. She made linguistic. Yes, I agree. She's making linguistic mistakes with this paper in some ways.
So it comes down to authority. If both people know which behavior maximizes utility, does one person have the authority to make that decision?
Exactly.
That's much less intuitive.
I'm saying I agree. Yeah. Like it like if you told me, okay, like someone made a decision that was like counterintuitive, that it was the right decision, I'd be like,
we both know that. Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not gonna question their authority to do it in some sense. Like,
but she does taint this with knowledge.
No, I know. Move on from that because I think, okay, Smart could answer that first reason really decisively in my mind by just saying like, but yeah, if it's the right thing to do, then like you shouldn't care if it's you or another person who does it, right? Okay, Okay, what's the second reason then? Okay, so she says, further, if one were to perform this action, or even if one were to approach life in a way that was generally open to considering performing actions like this when the utility calculus recommended it, This would be at odds with the aspiration to live in a way that meets one's fellow man and woman on equal and open terms as joint participants in a common practice or set of practices or even form of life. Okay, so I take it that this response is supposed to mean, like, in the doctor example, there's a reason not to sacrifice the one patient to save the five, because it would violate the aspiration to live in such a way that everyone is equal from the moral perspective. And again, like cancelable take, but like I'm not sure that I believe that. Like, is everyone equal from the moral perspective? Like, no.
So here's the thing.
But no,
it says,
like, I don't catch that intuition.
Yeah, I agree. It says as joint participants in a common practice, but to me, it would be you would be joint participants in a common practice if you kind of are both, like both of the the performer and like the audience or whatever, both recognize it. Like you can't take knowledge out of it. This is like the right thing to do. It seems like to not do it would be to remove yourself as a participant of a common practice. Like it's not common in that case almost.
I'm not sure I'm getting your point. Maybe I'm missing it.
The way I'm imagining it is, right, so you're the doctor, right? And then there are like other patients or whatever, right? Let's say the one you have to kill, right? I think if you're kind of describing a common practice, like, because that's the thing you would be at odds with here is you aspire to be joint participants in common practice. If you kind of both recognize that this is for the good, but then you kind of don't grant someone the authority to do something in that case, it seems like it would be breaking a common practice.
No, not well. I think that's her point. It's breaking the common practice of like medicine in some sense, right? Like it would be breaking the common practice to not kill the patient. It would be breaking common practice to not kill the patient. What are you understanding this point, Adam?
I think the common practice in this case, Giffin, is that we don't kill the patient.
Yeah.
like that is the common practice. Giffin's like I work.
Giffin's like not at my hospital.
yeah, exactly. Slice them open.
Okay. Well,
ravioli for dinner.
Okay. Well, minus that.
Giffin, I feel like I very much just misunderstood you, so I'm sorry. But,
so maybe I misunderstood what it means by the phrase "joint participants in a common practice."
Okay, so like joint participants in a common practice, I think means like take any practice that's a subset of like morality, like anything in like the legal domain, the medical domain, right? So in the medical domain, like a common practice that we have is that when you go to the hospital because you have a migraine, they're not going to use your organ, like kill you and use your organs to save 8 people who need transplants, right? That's like a common practice. And if you're a joint participant in that common practice, it's like the analogy to a board game, right? Like you're playing the medical game in a way that you think relies on like that being a rule that constitutes the practice, in the same way that if you're playing Settlers of Catan, I can't just build a road right over your road, even though you know what I mean? Like you'd be like, well, that's like a constitutive rule of the game.
So what if you work for like the CIA? And like
exactly.
Just like the common rules, of the practice is that you don't divulge information.
Yes.
Anyone outside the CIA, but you've come across information that you think would, if released to the general public, would bring about greater utility than having not released it. But as a result of that, let's say 100 different co-workers are going to be fired as a result. I mean, are you not in that case, like, setting yourself, are you not like kind of taking the authority or kind of seizing authority in that sense? Are you not maybe not living in with the aspiration to live in a way that meets one's fellow man and woman on equal and open terms in practice.
Yeah, it honestly seems like there are a lot of ways to just deny that point by saying just
maybe like in the medical field, I'm kind of maybe that specific example. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But then other ones, it's like, well, I certainly with like the CIA example. Is there an issue with that example that I just gave there? Like, I think like there's a common practice, you're violating it for the sake of, let's say, utilitarian aims. You're certainly not living in a way to meet one's fellow man and woman on equal and open terms within the practice itself.
Exactly, because you're violating a rule of the practice. Yeah.
Giffin, what do you think on that? Do you think?
I think that was a fair point within the game itself. Yeah. I guess my point that I was trying to make and failed to before was that there is still in a meta sense, like outside of like the substructure, a way in which you are still meeting them as equal, or excuse me, on equal and open terms.
You're right. You're totally right, and that's why I'm kind of like.
So like even though so like as long as like that superstructure is still there, then I feel like you're still kind of. You're not actually betraying that aspiration. It's just in a different way that it's being met.
Okay.
But then it's like with the doctor example, like, are you really betraying that same aspiration then if you perhaps like use one individual's organs to save four? Because certainly like you are living in a way to sort of like, in a way that meets one's fellow man and woman on equal and open terms. I mean, what if you're completely unbiased in how you approach that? And that is just like, maybe less so in that example. That one's hard.
There's like a way in which I'm actually becoming more convinced of the way that Smart would defend these practices, honestly, like the more we're talking, because like, okay, it's like, think about it. Why don't you like, I'm almost more drawn to, okay, you're a shit, I don't know. Okay. Here's my problem, right? Okay. Like, here's how Smart would defend obeying a rule. I'm assuming he would say like, okay, if you're a doctor and you're presented with that situation where you can harvest the organs to save 5 people, you don't do it because if you did it, even if this instance produced better consequences, right? It's pretty easy to actually grant that, like saving 8 people or whatever versus like 1. Like, yeah, the family's going to grieve, but like those 8 families won't. It's kind of easy actually to just grant that case. He's going to say like, okay, but the reason why like you can't do that, even if that act is good, is because corrupting the medical system at like people losing faith in their ability to like go see a doctor for fear of being like just harvested in that manner is way worse.
I wrote the phrase, you're sacrificing institutional buy-in.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I wrote.
Yeah.
Which has a social element, and in my conception originally on first read had kind of a knowledge element. But again,
yeah, exactly. Like, and also like that also explains why we should improve practices that already exist. So it's like, you know what I mean? Okay, like if we have a practice that's constituted by a set of rules, but we notice that those are reliably causing us to go wrong in some way. Like I feel like Smart's in a better position to explain why we would improve the practice, right? Like,
yeah, I agree, and I think it's also like an kind of an attack of maybe like an unsophisticated view of like broader consequentialism, right? Utilitarianism is like part of consequentialism, right? It's like it's like that's like a more specific view of consequences. So, but but with that specific example, it's just like unsophisticated because, as Giffin pointed out there, it's like a consequence of that is the institution takes a huge hit, right? So it's actually not that clear that is like, so to say that, oh, yes, that is obviously, the best thing to do. It's like, okay, well, it's not that obvious. And if the answer is like, it is still the best thing to do, all things considered,
then
maybe the institution doesn't take that much of a hit. You know what I mean? Maybe it's like, okay, then it becomes maybe a little more clear.
Yeah, all things considered.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Did Adam freeze for you?
No, he's buffering a little bit.
Oh.
No, I liked this paper at first, but now that we're like digging into it, I'm not actually sure that I don't know. Like, I'm not actually sure that I wouldn't agree with Smart's way of defending these things more, honestly. Okay, can we like, okay, because we obviously don't have time to like talk about the whole paper, but like insofar as it's connecting with what we've been talking about, okay, so the role of rules. Okay, okay, I wonder if we're going to agree with this paper more than, since I don't know. Okay, let me figure this out for a second. Okay, here's what I think Wolf is doing in this paper. Wolf defends the irreplaceable role that rules play in moral theory. Often rules are thought of as the bottom line of morality, in that we often, sorry, there's a typo, in that often violations of core rules we view as just wrong. For utilitarians, rules are grounded in the aim of maximizing utility, and for Kantians, rules derive from a maxim to follow whatever version of the categorical imperative is best, right? All of us are drawn to the more utilitarian perspective, so we should focus on that. But there's this philosopher, Gert. Gert's view does place rules at the center of morality. So Wolf kind of piggybacks this view and adds that morality is a narrower question than how one should live. Rather, it answers how to socially live. So kind of coming back to your idea, Giffin, about like, is that like the way to ground these things?
Yeah.
Seeing morality in this way allows for a more plausible set of rules to govern a more well-defined area of life, while also not consuming all of life in the way that utilitarianism or Kantianism does. Okay, I kind of feel like I actually agree with the earlier paper then more than the later one. In the sense that if my summary is correct, like she's defending the value of rules within morality in a stronger way than she seems to be defending them in the later paper, actually. But she's so the whole point of this paper is actually, like, I thought the explosion part of it was where she like kind of reconceived of what morality was actually referring to. Like she makes the claim that morality doesn't refer to like all areas of life, actually, which is kind of interesting, actually. I'm not sure.
That it's an interesting thing to read.
Yeah.
Why don't we go there?
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we just skip to that part?
Yeah, because I feel like
this is on page 227, and I had like 3 paragraphs just highlighted here, or two actually, but they're 2 big ones. Okay, so she says, so she's defending Gert's response here that rules are actually central to moral theory. I'll just read this. Okay, this response too may accept the premise that moral philosophy, or synonymously ethics, should range over all the questions relevant to thinking about how one should live. But it insists that moral philosophy is one thing, morality another. More precisely, morality is one thing that is relevant to the question of how one should live, and so it is a subject within the larger field of ethics. As Gert points out, there may be a great many things that contribute to living well, things one might offer as advice about how one should live, and that we all might urge people to do. greet everyone with a smile, learn how to draw. The best-selling series of Life's Little Instruction books are full of such advice. I wrote on the modern day, or a modern day thing would be like 12 rules for life. But to take this advice as moral advice, to take the reasons to follow them to be moral reasons, is both to fly in the face of ordinary linguistic usage and to forfeit a valuable linguistic tool for singling out, one important set of concerns and questions from others. So here's where the explosion happens. So on Gert's view, morality has a distinct and specific subject matter, much narrower than the question, how should one live? Morality has to do with the social life, with how to live with other people, and with how one wants other people to live with you and those who you love. A few salient points are worth highlighting. We could talk about those in general, but I totally agree with this, right? Like, that strikes me as so intuitive, because if you're asking yourself, how should one live? That includes moral answers and amoral ones, right? I don't know, you get that too, Giffin?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Okay, if someone asks you, how do you think one should live? My answer very naturally is going to include moral answers and non-moral ones. Right?
Yeah. Okay. That's intuitive. Yes.
Okay. But the question, how to live with other people, that actually is the domain of morality, precisely. I totally agree with that. And in that way, it is actually more amenable to
is that the extent of morality? Just living with other people?
I believe so. It's how to live with other people.
Excuse me, how to live with other people. I'm not sure if I buy into that.
Really? Okay, I cannot.
Can I shoot an elephant in the head?
Of course. Oh, okay. So substitute people for conscious beings. Then, yeah. That's a good point. No, that's actually a good point.
Okay, yeah.
No, it's actually a good point. Can I shoot an elephant?
Jordan, yes.
It's not a person.
Where do you think I just got back from? Some exposure.
The Houston Zoo. I just sneak a rifle. How should one live?
Worry not. This is outside the domain of morality.
So yeah. Giffin's addendum: how one should live with other conscious creatures.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
It's actually a really good. It's actually a really good.
Yeah. My dog's in the other room, so immediately I was like, I'm not sure if I buy that.
Just begins wailing on it.
Maybe that's Adam's stance. Yeah. Never a fan of dogs.
Yeah, it's true.
I wonder though how you would construct this, because it's kind of reciprocal in nature, right? With how you live with other people, and with how one wants other people to live with you. I wonder, would you include all conscious creatures in that construction? Certainly not, right? I mean, you wouldn't,
certainly not in the latter. Yeah.
You wouldn't call it immoral. You would never ascribe moral behavior to an elephant,
to a dog. Yeah.
I mean, maybe especially maybe a very spiteful elephant. Maybe.
Negative morality. That's it.
You can only do things wrongly.
It's just there's actually truth to that though. Just
it can never be a moral being, only an immoral.
Yeah, it's either amoral or immoral.
Adam's first paper, The Immorality of Elephants.
Yeah,
picture, if you will, a spiteful elephant. Would it not deserve to be shot?
Two tusks of duality.
Not even morality, just duality.
Yeah, it's either the immoral elephant or the amoral elephant. I've seen
missing third elephant.
Your whole argument is just physiologically that they do not have three tusks.
Yeah, it's just like I've actually seen it. Like I've spent 30 years with elephants. Just like they either seem to be like robots, or they get a certain look in their eye, and they can just and you can tell that they're like a fully moral agent at that point. And it's always something wicked.
But they never act morally with that look in their eye.
Right before terrorizing a village, that's when they gain agency. Anyways, no, that's my minor addendum, I'd say. But yeah, otherwise I think that's kind of fair.
But yeah, I think that just kind of made sense whenever I read it though.
No, I totally agree. Because I was just thinking about like what a reductio it is to imagine like, it's just like I honestly can't even imagine what the content of morality would be if you just pause it like, okay, like imagine just some like man on a desert island with like no other conscious creatures around him. Like there is no such thing as morality in that circumstance, right? Like he can't affect anything else in like any way, right?
Yeah, I mean, do you have like some duty to yourself? Like, is there like, I don't know.
It would be hard to say that you like. It's there. Yeah. Do you have a?
I don't know. I'm just throwing something out there. I don't know.
Adam, what was your question again? I'm sorry.
I mean, we were just kind of like just throwing out the idea of like, what if you were the only conscious creature? Like, is there some sort of like, is there still a moral sphere that you operate in, like with respect to yourself? But I don't know. So.
I almost at that point, like, I almost want to call that like. Not even sure what I want to call that at that point, but it does seem like something different than morality.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. It's like you can be happier or less happy in that world, but it's kind of a moral question, like from the perspective of the universe. But like, you know what I mean?
So maybe some aspect of it survives.
Maybe
if you do take you can have higher utility with certain actions than others. Still, of course.
True. You just bash your head with a rock.
No, I feel like you actually do like slough off a huge portion of morality in that case.
Yeah. Okay.
She's like, from the perspective of the universe, like you're like the only suffering. It's like perfect suffering, and like the universe's perspective, like just doesn't care. So, do you hear that ringing?
Ringing?
No, actually.
Good. Okay.
It's the tinnitus.
We're shooting that elephant, man.
Yeah, exactly. 3 days in the war.
The Great Elephant War.
The war on elephants.
Okay, I think this is kind of the thing that. Oh, okay, so she says, okay, if you conceive of morality, with tackling it, like the purview of morality is social life, how to live with other people. There's a few consequences that result. 3. Okay, first, because our sociality is both a fundamental aspect of our human nature and a pervasive feature of our physical existence, it will play an extraordinarily important role in shaping our answers to the broader question of how to live. Totally checks out for me. So like, I think what she's saying there is like, because we are so ingrained as like these social beings, morality is going to show up as very important in the larger question of how one should live as well. Right.
Agreed.
Okay. Nice. Second, the importance and character of our interest that others live cooperatively and on an equal basis with us and those we care about gives us a unique and distinctive reason for wanting to insist that people behave in certain ways and refrain from behaving in others. That is, we have a reason for wanting to put pressure on people to treat others in certain ways that is lacking in connection with our reasons for wanting people to smile and to learn to draw. I totally buy this too. Like this is the part of her social command theory paper that I bought the most. Was that like, yeah, it's just so true. Like no one is an island. Like we all depend on each other in like very, very distinct ways that like rely on us insisting that people do behave in certain ways and refrain from behaving in others. So I just buy that point.
I guess like I guess we're kind of building up to it. So
yeah.
Here, but I just like she's like defining what rules are for me right now. Like I know what rules are. Like I you know what I mean? Like that makes sense. Like
yeah.
Like, we want others to behave in certain ways because we live in a society. So but yeah, I mean, like, so we want, to have a reason to either like punish or, just kind of cast moral aspersions, you know what I mean? If people are living in such a way that we would otherwise have them live, you know what I mean? Or prefer them to live. So yeah, that's why we have rules.
So, yeah, and she says, finally, understanding morality to be about a specifiable aspect of our lives implicitly acknowledges the existence of other aspects that are potential sources of value and of reasons to live one way rather than another. And I actually think that is a much better way to resist the like smart act utilitarianism response, right? Isn't that actually like a really like a much better way? So okay, she's saying like, okay, if we understand morality to be about a specific aspect of our lives, namely the social ones, and there are rules there, and that this aspect is of great, like it's very important to the other aspects of our lives and our value too, which we just do hold. Like that to me seems like a much stronger basis to, if you do want to resist like violating a rule, even when it maximizes utility, that seems to be the better one to do it on. It's like, and I'm not saying that I would use that, but like, because she says, putting the last 2 points together, it seems that we have reasons for wanting to require of people that they behave in certain ways with respect to others, and reasons also for wanting not to require too much. We want, in other words, a set of requirements that are limited in their demands so as to allow people the freedom to live lives that they can find to be good and rewarding. So like, okay, maybe this answers your question, Adam. This is where she spells out the role of rules. Okay. This is the next page. What we morally require of others and what others may legitimately require of us should not constrain our concrete physical options so much as to severely reduce our ability to find and to shape a way of life that is personally rewarding, nor should it constrain our psychological options so much as to interfere with our ability to love and to attend to those features of life that make it worth living. How can such requirements be specified? The most obvious and I think also the best way is by offering a set of rules. Okay, so she's saying like, okay, if I'm understanding her, she's saying like rules then under this conception serve to set like kind of the floor and ceiling almost. It's like rules are such that like you can't dip below them, or like you ought not dip below them, but also like once you've met them, there's no imperative for you to like continue meeting them or like continue maximizing them, such that you are like free to live the life of like a non-moral saint. Remember from that paper? So it's like, I don't know.
But your other paper, you can dip beneath though.
I know. And in my reading response, I actually said like there's a weird tension there.
Yeah.
But like evaluating
duty. That, right?
Yeah, that line of duty. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're pretty connected.
I do. Yeah. Like
intuitively, absolutely.
Yeah.
But maybe she has some
sure,
third, fourth, fifth paper that explains the relationship.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, conceiving as rules of like, I don't know. What do you think about that idea on its own merits, though? Like, conceiving of the rules of morality such that they set like kind of a floor and a ceiling, so that if you act above the floor, that's what's required of you, and it's not required of you to go above the ceiling, such that, I mean, we talked about this in like the Moral Saints paper. Like, is someone who just maximizes utility even a person? Like, scarcely so. You know what I mean?
I guess maybe I kind of lost that part. How is there both a ceiling and a floor? Because like where she doesn't want to require too much out of anyone, right? So like they've got to,
Yeah.
but also it's got to be sort of like a kind of a baseline set of rules that we would all expect out of fellow human beings. So it's kind of like a single line in my mind. You know,
see, when she said, when she said we don't want to expect too much, that's what I saw as the ceiling. Not that it's immoral to go above, but a ceiling as to what the rules require of us.
Agreed. I guess like there's a ceiling.
I thought that was kind of describing like a framework for the establishing that baseline.
Yeah.
It's like
because
setting the baseline
too much.
Yeah.
Because like I almost see is like you almost kind of like view like this area that you like enter into where it's there's both like a baseline, but then you can act up into a ceiling. But in reality, there's sort of just one line where it's not set too high and it's not set too low.
See, I was conceiving it the ceiling in the sense of the ceiling is sort of like the most that morality could require of you. But as she says, there are like other aspects of life too. So if you wanted to go above the ceiling of what morality required of you, it's not that it's impermissible to do so.
How could one do that?
How
go above the ceiling of what morality requires of you?
So if you think of morality as that like toned down version that she's talking about. So if you're a utilitarian, there is no such thing as above what morality requires of you because it's the maximum amount of play. It's like by definition, right?
Yeah.
But if you think about like, okay, you know, there's not a great way to actually like put it into words, but like, you know, creating like a certain, so you can't do certain things to establish the floor, right? So you can't create like huge amounts of suffering, for instance. Then at the same time, there's sort of, it's not a ceiling as in it's a limit. Like, it's not that you can't do something above it, but in the sense that like, if you're thinking of morality as like a set of rules that are more clearly defined, it's like, you know, like you've satisfied your moral duty if you give 20% of your income to Oxfam or whatever, right? But like, if you personally are just enamored with Oxfam and you just like love that organization, you give 25%. That's like kind of above and beyond like the ceiling of what morality is requiring. That like it's
above a ceiling or above a floor.
No, because like what if per se like the floor would be just like that you give anything at all. But morality is not going to require you to give more than 20% or what. Like it's a super contrived example, but like you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time conceptualizing like the ceiling analogy. To be honest,
I think we might be talking past each other. Like I know what you're talking about, Jordan. I just feel like this paragraph doesn't say that per se. Like I feel like because what you're talking about there wouldn't necessarily be a rule, right? Like an example, like the rule would be.
No, fair enough. If you're talking about just rules,
yeah. So
it's not. You wouldn't call it a rule. That's fair. You wouldn't call it a rule. It could be sort of a byproduct of the rule, but it wouldn't be a rule.
I view like the rules is like the baseline.
Yeah.
So where it's like, of course, above, you could give the 20% to Oxfam.
Yeah.
20% of your income to Oxfam, but it's certainly I'm not sure that charity is a rule. Maybe.
So what do you, we honestly should wrap up soon, but like, what do you make of the idea that, okay, if she's like narrowing the scope of morality, then does that give her, is that like a better basis to resist the Smart's Act utilitarianism challenge? Like if she's narrowing the scope of morality and within that scope like heightening the role that rules play there, like does that give her the ability to say like, no, I'm not going to convict the innocent person even if I know the outcome would be better, because in a non-moral way, like adhering with law as someone who's been like a judge for 30 years is just like something that you value. Like you don't want to break the rules of that practice because like it's a game that you've been playing for so long or something like that. Is that like a better?
It's a good question. I almost feel like my instinct could be wrong. I just want to preface that. But like it almost seems like a lot of it's baked into morality for me, where it's just like once again, the law example, I can't help but going to like, okay, well, they're like, why are the rules of this institution valuable? You know what I mean? Like if the institution, lead to a better world and like upholding those values of the institution, then it's like, okay, that's like a serious consequence.
Yeah.
We're examining here, as opposed to just like, the practice itself being unquestioned.
You're still drawn to the way that Smart would defend it then. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And to be honest, at the end, to jump back to the previous paper for a second, the two concepts, Wolf kind of ends it by kind of like acknowledging that Smart would be right in certain like counterclaims. Like, do you remember that? Like her last line is, once again, Smart would be right. So she kind of like acknowledges that like Smart would have responses to all these things.
Yeah.
Ready.
Well, the relevant part is right before that. I think she says, accepting the practice conception of rule utilitarianism, Smart might grant, allows this question to be more clearly posed in a way that makes clear the possibility of a variety of answers that avoid the charge of rule worship. But it does not answer that question. It only pushes the debate to a deeper level. Once again, Smart would be right. So
yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of.
I literally were like, what a Wolf way to end the paper, because it's like
what we're doing right now, where it's just more of like an examination of just like, okay, it's not really rule worship. Like why are we preserving the practices of this specific institution? And if they're also preserving, for other consequences, then it actually makes sense.
And okay, doesn't Smart's way of defending, doesn't Smart's way of viewing this debate actually make sense of like, I don't know about you guys, but like this goes back to the above and below the line of duty paper, when like, okay, when I think I have a moral duty to do something, like the reason why I feel obligated to do it is like because it's the right thing to do. Like there's some sense in which like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example where it's like, I don't want to do the right thing, but I do it. And I literally have the experience of like doing it out of pure, like, you know what I mean? Like you're almost like driven from behind by like, fuck, you recognize like that is the right thing to do. And like, I'm not going to be a bastard here. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, oh, okay. Like this hasn't actually happened. I'm just trying to come up with like a reasonable example, but like, no, it actually hasn't.
So imagine there's an elephant in the zoo.
Murderous, traitorous thing they are.
I hate them.
I'm sorry, please.
This has actually never happened to me, but I could well imagine like my reaction to this. Okay, like, I'm a grad student. It's not a particularly lucrative, thing to do in life. You find a wallet that has like so much cash in it that you're sure that this person's rich. Like if they're carrying him out like around like $500 in cash or whatever, like, okay, you're like, this guy doesn't need this money. You know what I mean? No one carries around $500 if that's not discretionary funds.
His bank account. Come on.
There's a little slip that says life savings.
Carries life savings in his pocket.
Yeah.
He was transferring it from the bank.
And you've just like, and I can imagine that like you've just like broken a bone or whatever, right? And you had to go to MedExpress to get it set, and you're like, fuck, this like blows up your like your budget. Yeah, thank you. I can totally imagine the impulse to be like, or like, what if there's like, you look at the guy's insurance card in his wallet also, and you're like, fuck, he drives like 2 Lamborghinis or whatever. You're like, okay, this guy definitely doesn't like, you know what I mean? Like this guy definitely doesn't need the money. Why wouldn't you just like, okay, like remove, what if I get caught or whatever, take out the money, still give the guy his wallet back and be just like, I'm sorry, dude, I found it without any money in it. Like I could well imagine me doing being like, fuck, and just returning it with the money. And if I did that, it would be out of purely obligation to like what the moral thing to do is, right? Like, I don't know. There's like some way in which, like, how does I guess Wolf would just say like that's a value that I hold, and like I don't know. I almost lost my own point there.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you might feel guilty if you like didn't have like perfect knowledge, but say you do like perfect knowledge here, like he doesn't even know that he lost his wallet. You know that he doesn't even know he lost his wallet. He will never notice the difference. Yes. And if he returned it, he would feel, it would be might feel a bit,
He's almost ambivalent.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like it is what it is, So it's like
I already bought a new one.
Yeah, exactly. Already bought 5 new $100. But yeah, I mean, like in a circumstance like that, like if you were given all that information, you might be like, I don't know. I mean, maybe not too. Yeah. Might not feel bad at all.
Yeah,
you make a strong internal argument that you're maximizing utility.
Yeah. Okay.
It's aligned with the universe's perspective. Right?
Here's the deal. Like, I think we're at the point where
Dude's like, where's my Coke money at? Like, there, the universe, I think, says to take the money and set your phones back.
The universe's perspective.
Yeah. The universe is getting coked up. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I have so satisfactory points with these papers, but at the same,
I know
it's probably on me.
I agree. So, it's got to be on us because, like, you usually. I said this at the beginning. I don't know. Like, I think these. I think the way to conclude this is just by saying, like, okay, there's definitely like really interesting questions that are raised here, and like maybe actually if like people are listening to this, if they're binging it, maybe actually like having listened to some previous episodes, like maybe there's actually like a clear answer that we're missing here, or just like a way in which we're understanding or misunderstanding, or I don't know.
I guess like my main problem, at least with this paper, Rule of Rules, is that, and this is once again probably my fault, but I understood like the practical, pragmatic reasons for having rules. Mm-hmm. But I felt like she was trying to sell me something more. I felt like there was like some deeper meaning to rules that she was saying are at like the center of often like moral frameworks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I understand why we have rules.
Yeah.
I understand the utility of rules.
Yes.
Yeah.
But on a deeper level, which was I was convinced she was trying to sell me that rules are deeply meaningful. And I got to a point where I understood that they were pragmatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't, I don't know.
I'm not sure I buy the deeper.
Yeah. Against my better judgment, can I just like wager a go at it?
Of course.
Okay, so like, okay. So think about like the two main theories that we're familiar with. Like,
Giffin made me laugh this time.
What did I do? Impossible.
It's like. I think I'm rubbing off on him with the absurdity. He's like, you can I wager a guess? It's like, no. We both deleted the video call.
You just leave. It might also be relevant.
I've heard enough.
I wonder if it's also relevant to say that we're recording this a bit later that night than we've recorded the last few episodes.
Yeah,
I think it's definitely playing a role for me. Okay. What if she's trying to say like, okay, think about the two moral theories that we are the most familiar with. For consequentialist reasoning, following rules is good insofar as it maximizes utility, which is like a shallow way of valuing rules, right?
Yeah.
For a Kantian, kind of the same thing, right? Following rules is good insofar as it conforms with like duty, respecting people, treating them as autonomous, right? So it's sort of instrumental almost in a way.
Yeah, and the rules are out if they don't meet those aims.
Exactly. Okay. But so both utilitarianism and Kantian ethics place another value sort of like at a more root level than the rules, right? So it's maximizing utility, it's adhering to like respecting other individuals, right? Okay. And the rules result from trying to follow that value. So you're maximizing utility or never violating like a rule or whatever, a law of the categorical imperative, right? But she's almost like saying, no, rules are more central than that. And I think like that's the point that she's trying to make. But honestly, like maybe we've just been talking for too long. Like I'm failing to understand like the punch of why they're more central.
Yeah.
But like I think I understand like what she's trying to say. Maybe I don't understand like how she's trying to say it at this point.
It'll be worth a reread for me.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, maybe she sometimes does this with the conclusion. Let me just read this. This is my last go, and we're gonna end the call no matter what after this.
My thumb's on the button.
So she says, another group of moral theorists, we might call them social moralists, has, I believe, still more reason to give rules a central and ineliminable place in their theories. The question will be raised is one of these conceptions of morality the right one? Is there a fact of the matter about what morality fundamentally is? My own response to this question is yes and no. And she concludes the paper by saying, so there's one way, as I said in the beginning of the essay, such rules as don't kill, don't lie, keep your promises, do for many people constitute the paradigm or the core of morality. It is the default position of what morality on the man is to the man on the street. If our subject matter is to be rooted in ordinary conceptions of morality, it is plausible to root it in this. But there's another way, and that is that there is an important and distinct question to be asked. What ought we require of each other in order to live peaceably and well in a common world? There is, in other words, reason to be interested in a distinct set of rules to which punishment is legitimately attached, which people have reason to obey and to encourage others to obey in the interest of social peace and well-being. In other words, if these rules were not already out there in the consciousness and discourse of the men and women on the street, in the institutions of parents, teachers, rabbis, and priests, in the conversations we have with each other, we would have to invent them. It would not be absolutely necessary to refer to this as the set of moral rules, or to refer to the larger system of ideas and values that concern living cooperatively and on an equal basis with others as morality. But it would not be a bad idea. So like, I'm actually wondering, based on reading that now, and this is the last thing I'll say, because I am near brain dead at this point. I wonder if this is actually a super circular argument by Wolff, in the sense that like, and I kind of mean that in a derogatory way, in the sense that, okay, she's saying like, well, what role do rules serve in a utilitarian conception, right? They only serve to maximize the good. Right. And that's kind of a shallow thing. But then she's saying like, okay, like she says, there is, in other words, reason to be interested in a distinct set of rules to which punishment is legitimately attached, which people have reason to obey and to encourage others to obey in the interest of social peace and well-being. Is that not like doing the same thing there? Like defining rules as like that which gives us the possibility of living a good life, which on like a really plausible consequentialist basis, like you would say like, okay, that's the basis for rules. It actually seems like a mission of rules for me. Like I didn't come out of this with like a totally new conception of rules. Like that just seemed like, yep, we have rules, for which we expect out of other people. Like, yeah, that's true. It's true. And it's like, and we could legitimately, apply punishment if these, rules aren't followed. Okay. Yeah, I follow that. That's why we have rules. That's true. Yeah. And it's like, these are very, very deep and central to morality. Well, they certainly help people, like the man on the street. It even helps us too. I mean, it's like, it's good to kind of have some rules that generally follow from morality, like
whatever kind of conception of morality you have. Like, it's good to have a certain set of rules, and they all kind of follow pretty logically from whatever sense of morality you have. Like, don't lie, don't steal, don't like generally, right? Like in most circumstances, that's a pretty good rule of thumb. So
okay. All right. Well, I think that these two papers are the papers I've disagreed with the most out of all of them we've read, and they happen to be on the same episode.
I had trouble with these papers.
Okay. If you're listening, please don't stop listening to us based on this episode. This could be the worst of the series, I think, honestly, because I don't know why. I'm not sure that. I also wonder what role doing two papers in an episode did to us also, because we're back to one a week from now on. So if this episode is bad to the listeners, like, I guess give us a mulligan. Like, that's what I'm thinking about right now. Were you gonna say, Giffin?
I was gonna say,
don't treat us like the elephants.
No, this is tangential, but I think the two papers thing probably is a negative aspect, in part because they were written not together. Like,
that's true.
So, like, there could be a different kind of priors that she's writing from, like, because of personal growth and stuff. So I think that adds some tension.
Because they were like a decade and a half apart, too.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like,
and I kind of liked the 2000. Was it 16?
16.
I kind of liked that one more than the older one. Yeah.
Interesting.
The two concepts. Like, I thought. I didn't agree with that one per se, but I was definitely.
I like the topic.
I liked the topic. I liked the paper, and I thought it was very interesting. Like, at least, like, kind of the framework I was playing. Yeah. The rule of rules, I just kind of, when I reached the end there and read that conclusion, I'm like, I don't, like, this didn't really change my perspective on it. Like, I didn't buy into that it was something very deep and stuff. So, I don't know.
Maybe what we can do, let me look at the syllabus real quick. Because I'm just thinking about, like, so there's two more papers, two more weeks of, like, within moral philosophy. So let's read those with an open mind, see where they go. But I'm also thinking about, like, I don't know, I'm like, this, like, just for us three or whatever, like, I wonder if after the semester over winter break, like, because I know, Adam, you and I were talking about, like, okay, I kind of want to get my head straight about, like, what I think about consequentialism in general. Like, maybe over winter break, we might circle back around and do some, like, addendum episodes and read other people about these topics too. Because I don't know if this interests, like, you as much, Giffin, but, like,
no, I'd be interested.
Yeah.
I mean, at a certain point, I'll be interested in stepping away from Wolf a little bit.
No, of course.
Because I am interested in just, like, a system of ethics that is a little more well thought out than my current one.
Current system of ethics. It's impossible to harm an elephant.
It's not.
no, but in, like, a
rebuke all suggestions of altered morality that approach me.
No, in the moral system, it's all too possible to harm an elephant.
All right, shit. All right, okay, we should end the episode at least.
Yeah, because I've still got laundry to do.
No, I know, me too. Okay, if people are listening again, listen to the next episode before, like, dear God, listen to the next episode before unsubscribing. And with that, tune in next time. If you want to support the show in any way, you can do so simply by sharing it. I'm hoping to get this show out to more people, and so if you want to share it on Twitter or social media, that would really help me. You can also rate it on Apple Podcasts, like this video if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe via Apple Podcasts or an RSS feed, or you can connect me with recommended guests or topics to cover. You can get in contact with me at platoscavepodcast@gmail.com. Follow me on Twitter at Jordan_C_Myers. And I now have a website for my philosophy endeavors at jordanmyers.org. If you want to know a little bit more about me and my fellow co-hosts, I'm a master's student in philosophy at the University of Houston. I did my undergrad at the University of Pittsburgh, where I studied mechanical engineering and philosophy. And now that I'm back at school, I'm hoping to more closely study moral responsibility, free will, ethics, epistemology, and moral psychology. Those are topics that I was introduced to and got really interested in my undergrad work. Adam and Giffin accompanied me on this show, and Adam is one of my oldest friends. We actually met in kindergarten, and we've been interested in philosophical topics for as long as we can remember, and in a lot of ways, it's been the basis of our friendship. Adam studied chemistry and biology at Cornell, and he's especially interested in moral responsibility as well, but also law, religion, and free will. Giffin is also one of my oldest friends. We've been friends since elementary school as well. Giffin studied biology and economics at RPI, and now he works in human health research. And he's particularly interested in exploring political philosophy. With all of that information, again, I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you get in contact with me or follow my work in any way that you deem reasonable to do. So with that, thank you for listening.